Welcome to today's presentation with Generations Law Group. My name is Tiffany Kudrovets, and I'm one of the attorneys here. And I'm going to talk to you about creating your village, in particular, creating your village for people who are solo agers. Like I said before, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box and we'll look at them and try to address them as we go. And then also we'll have some time for questions at the end. So this presentation, just a typical legal disclaimer. Everything I say is just general elder law, estate planning, sort of life advice. Anything that's particular to you, you would want to talk to your attorney about. I'm lucky that some of you are officially my clients, and some of you I know work with Samantha and with Philip and with Kathleen, and we're happy to help you all with any questions. But just know this is just general advice. So the bulk of what we're going to talk about today really just talks about a life plan. And my goal in this presentation is to get you thinking about things that are important to you now, to set priorities, and then to feel empowered, especially as a solo ager, to find people and to build a village and to make your wishes known so you have that support you need. Because not everyone has a family nearby, not everyone has a spouse or adult children who are nearby to help. So I hope that you'll leave with some ideas and resources that can help you build that life plan and that foundation that will last for many years. So a life plan is something that you might have thought about or maybe not, but it's basically just looking at your current life and thinking about, what do I have going on right now? What are my priorities? How am I spending my time? How am I spending my money? Just sort of doing a self-assessment of everything that you have going on, and then setting out, what do I want my future to look like? What do I need to prioritize? Is there anything that I need to change? And then making sure that you have a village of people that we'll talk about in a minute who can help you fill those life goals and to meet those things, so that you don't want your priorities to go to the wayside, or you don't want someone to help you and do what they think is important. So if you can think about a life plan and write it down or share your notes, it's something that will help you just have a better, happier life in the end. When you're thinking about a life plan, what you want to do is really take the time to sit down and look at your current situation, just everything in life that's meaningful to you, everything that you do. How is your health now? Do you have any things that have been that you're sort of monitoring but aren't major health concerns now but might be in the future? Do you have your estate planning documents? We'll talk about those at the end, but there's some things that you should do now, some things that come into play after you pass away, and then just a couple other topics. We're going to go through each of these, and I hope to give you just ideas and resources on how you can create a well-rounded plan and things that you should think about. We put a note in here that says that a life plan can be for any age, and it's something that will change over time. If you are a young professional who's starting a family, your life plan will look a lot different than if you're retiring, or if, say, you're 85 years old. So a life plan is something that you should create and think about, but you definitely want to look at it over time. Your goals might shift, your priorities might shift. Just keep that in mind, that a life plan is not just one thing and set in stone. It's going to be a continuously changing and evolving set of goals that you're working towards. So the key people in your village, some of these are just who you would think about, and just like your friends, your neighbors, your faith community. Think of the people who you see day to day, the people who bring you joy, or the people who check in on you. And that's sort of your close social network. And then it could also be your relatives. And some of your relatives, especially in a solo aging situation, may not live close, which is why you might need to build your network in other ways. Additionally, your village would include your doctors, so your primary care physician and anyone else who's involved in your care. And then, of course, we would recommend that you have a good rapport with an attorney, just to have on call, who knows your needs, your priorities, who's taken some notes, who you can check in with, a financial advisor. So this is not meant to give any specific financial advice, but you absolutely want to make sure that you have money saved up over time so that you can have the life that you would like to lead once you're retired and as you age, both in terms of just having money to take care of your health, but also just to do those things that you enjoy doing and follow your passions. And then the last thing on the list is a geriatric care manager or an aging life care advocate. And I want to spend a little bit of time on that because I think that's something that people may be less familiar with. So a care manager or life advocate can help with every single thing that we're talking about today. They can give you resources, they can facilitate different things for you. But I wanted to tell you about a little bit about their role and how you go about finding one. So a care manager is someone who typically works for a fee, and they might have an initial fee and then an hourly fee, or they might have just some sort of structure, but there's some sort of fee structure. And what they do is basically they act as a professional relative. So it's someone you can trust who's on your side, who can facilitate all aspects of your care. They can be the middle person between you and doctor's offices or between you and relatives who live far away. It's someone who can help manage your medication and coordinate transportation. So this person, think of them as someone who is basically a care manager. They're basically managing your life and overseeing things when you need help. A lot of people will think a caregiver might hire a care manager to help because they can't. But you also, as you age, you can hire someone yourself to have that extra support that you need. So what the care manager will do is they'll meet with you, and similar to the life plan discussion, they'll find out what you have going on now in terms of your health, your money, where you live, and then they'll find out your goals. So say you want to age in place, they might say, okay, we need to find someone to look at your house, and we need to figure out, is your house somewhere you can age? Do you have a lot of steps? Might not be so good. What is the workaround to that? So the care manager can figure out what you want to do, figure out what needs to be done to make that happen, and then they can actually push the steps along. So think of them as someone who is basically like they're your right-hand person. They can help you do anything that you might need help with. Some questions if you're looking for a care manager or life advocate is one, I hate to keep bringing up money, but you want to know what their fees are and how do they get paid and how often and what are the expectations with that. You want to look at their qualifications. So likely they have some professional training in social services or nursing to support you, but make sure that you're hiring someone who has the qualifications and the background and the experience to help you with what you need. It's helpful to know what are their procedures. Like, do they have a large staff where you don't know who you're interacting with, or will you have one particular person who is essentially your personal care manager? And if so, you could find out what happens in an emergency. How do I have access to them? Or if I need home care, can they help with that? And every company that provides these services is a little bit different, but it's helpful to ask questions so that when you're hiring someone to help facilitate these things for you in life, that you know that there's someone you can work with and you mesh well together. It's a good idea to contact a care manager, not necessarily now, but when there's not a crisis. So if you're a solo ager and you know that you don't have that community support or local family or even distant family, if you're just sort of doing it on your own, it's a good thing to reach out and develop that rapport now. So that way, if you end up in the hospital or if there's an emergency situation, they can step right in and nothing needs to be done because they'll know you, they'll know your situation, they'll know your plans. So a care manager, when all else fails, is someone who can really be your biggest advocate and help you put your life plan into action. The care manager, we can actually all refer to each other because we all sort of overlap in our duties, but a care manager is a really good resource for finding other professionals. So you have wonderful elder law attorneys at Generations Law Group, but if you needed a financial advisor, if you needed a new primary care physician, for example, the care manager is going to know people in your area who can help you. So with health and healthcare issues, there's two main things that you need to think about as you age. And one of those is what you personally can do for yourself. And one of the biggest things that you can do is actually make sure you have a primary care physician and make sure you go in for your annual checkups. And it seems like such a minor thing, and people think, well, of course, I can find a doctor, I can go to urgent care. But when there's a crisis and we need answers, or when there's a crisis and we're trying to activate a healthcare proxy or a power of attorney that's a springing power that we'll talk about, if someone has a pre-existing relationship with a healthcare provider, it's much easier to get them into that doctor's office last minute or to do telehealth because they're familiar with you. And so when we're saying we need a letter of competency or we need a quick appointment, when you have that established patient-client relationship, it can be easier to get in the door and get the care you need or the letter that you might need to activate something. The second to that is that the doctor can give you all kinds of advice. And if you're perfectly healthy now, then, keep doing the things that you're doing, whether it's getting in 8 to 10,000 steps or drinking water or just staying active. But it's never too late to make those small changes. So when you're thinking of your life plan, make sure you're remembering to take care of yourself. And so all of those little tweaks that you can do with eating or health or mental stimulation and getting out there and socializing, all of that ties into healthcare. If there's an emergency situation and you need specific care, it goes without saying, but make sure you're doing what the doctor is telling you to do. A lot of people will be prescribed physical therapy or to do certain things, and they'll say, oh, I just don't want to do that. I know I should do it. But in terms of just living your best life, they're giving you a plan that can help you. So make sure you listen to their advice. Second to that are sort of things that involve other people. So there might be times when you need help making healthcare decisions. If your healthcare proxy is activated, for example. And so when you have this health checkup and you've done your self-assessment, you want to make sure that you have a trusted person to share that information with. Because if a healthcare agent is called and asked to act on your behalf because you're incapacitated, they shouldn't be making decisions for themselves. They should be thinking, oh, okay, yes, I'm Susan's healthcare agent. And Susan told me that in this type of circumstance, this is what she would want to happen. And so you want to make sure that you're communicating these things so it's not a surprise. Or your medical background, or if you're taking different medications, it's helpful for someone to know all of the things that are going on and relay those to a doctor, just in case you end up with, 5 different doctors and specialists all combining notes. Your healthcare agent, if they have the information already, they can say, oh, she would want this. She told me about this medicine. She doesn't like to do this. And then with respect to health insurance and Medicare, it's good to know, just make sure you're aware of your financial situation in terms of insurance and how much things will cost and what's covered and what's not. You should also know some insurances require a referral to a specialist and some don't, but just make sure that you understand your particular plan so that you don't end up in a bind saying, I need some of this, some particular care, and it may or may not be covered. So next is work life and retirement. So when you're thinking of your life plan, many of you may already be retired, or you may have retired and then went back in the work field to do something different. But when you're thinking of your situation and what you want the future to look like, retirement can be a very, very big piece of it. And with retirement, there's a financial piece to it of loss of income and how are you receiving any pension or what kind of benefits you might be receiving. But there's also the social aspect of retirement. And it's something where it's probably going to change over time. It's something that we all look forward to. I can't wait till I retire and I'll have all this free time to do whatever you want to do. And for some people, it's seeing their grandkids, or some it's I want to garden and go for walks, or I want to travel. but to have that goal in mind of what you want retirement to look like and start planning for it so that you have that community and you have the finances and you can really, again, I keep saying, live your best life. You want to set that motion so you have everything ready. With respect to retirement, though, it could also sometimes be considered a loss. So I've heard of it referred to as a permanent vacation, but sometimes the permanent vacation isn't as amazing as one would think it would be, because maybe you're avoiding the commute, or maybe you were always in meetings. You're like, I'm so glad I don't have to do that anymore. But on the flip side, you're losing some of the people who might have been your work friends, or for some people, you get so involved in work, and that's your identity and your purpose and your meaning in life. You get a lot of validation from work, or you build bonds with people. And so think about how you don't necessarily have to just fill your time so that it's all busy, but how can you fill your heart and fill your mind so that when you are retired, you feel like, I still have a great sense of purpose. I'm still happy. I'm still socializing. So think about this is again with the priorities. Is it family? Is it travel? Is it quiet time? Do you want to fully disengage? So it's not going to be a loss for everyone, but we want to make sure that you anticipate sort of the ups and downs that could come with retirement. In terms of socializing, something that's really helpful is thinking about where you're going to live or how you're going to spend your time. And so if you decide you want to live in an assisted living community, for example, you might go and they have dining rooms with really good food. They have a full activity schedule. They bring in entertainment. People can visit you. So you might end up living in a facility where they pretty much plan your days and you can just meet people in that shared living environment. If you're living at home and you're aging in place, you might have to make more of an effort. And that might be through online groups or online games. It might be going to your senior center, Sudbury, Acton, Littleton. All of these areas have wonderful senior centers where they have programs and people can just go and hang out with each other. So there's different ways that you can build up a community and get that socialization when you retire, and it might be a little bit more quiet than you expected. In the end, there's a resource. Aileen Gerhardt has an online group that you could join, but there's many groups out there that you might find to sort of fill in the gaps after you retire. With lifestyle issues, I think that many of us feel it, and I think you can start feeling it when people say, I turned 30, I turned 40, I turned 50. It's just as you age, just different things change, families change and priorities change. But there's a lot of change just with our mental health and our physical health that happen as you age. And part of that goes back to the healthcare discussion, which is staying active and socializing. And as much as you can get out into the community doing that. And our hope is that you can embrace the changes and you can make the best of them and use all the resources you have, whether from a care manager or referrals from an attorney or a friend. But we want you to be able to follow your interests. You can stay interested in current events. You can do crossword puzzles. Like I said, you could hang out at the senior center, but just mostly for the lifestyle issues. We don't want you to become like sad and alone. If you need help, just reach out to someone. And a lot of times, even if you don't know who to reach out to, like if you reach out to us and it's not something that we specifically do, well, we know people who are at the senior center. We know people who are at the library who do events. We know care managers. So if you reach out to one person, it can just set off a chain of people saying, oh, this is what this person needs to be happy or to thrive, or this person needs help with food. And so just in terms of lifestyle and putting yourself out there, just know that you can find people who can help you get what you need to keep up your mental health and your physical health. So functional status, this is a really big slide. And I think that when you're thinking about your life plan, the functional status questions are some of the biggest ones, because part of it is just about happiness and embracing your life and just doing the best you can. but the functional status in life is really the nuts and bolts of what you might need help with. For functional status, this is where you do that self-assessment and you say, am I currently living at home or am I in a facility? Do I like where I live? Can I continue living at home? Just an evaluation of your current status. Are you driving and should you be? We actually had a presentation on that recently about how to know maybe when you shouldn't be driving anymore, or if you have a family member and you think, I think they shouldn't be driving, but figuring out if you're driving and if you're not, what are some means of public transportation or taxis or Ubers? Can you safely use stairs? And that's relevant at home, but it could be relevant depending on where your doctor, your dentist are, or the buildings that you frequent. But you want to make sure you're able to get around. And then how are you getting, how are you getting your groceries and your prescriptions? How are you making to appointments on time? So these are sort of the foundation of keeping up with your life and your obligations and making sure you're fed and that you're seeing the doctor, all of the things that we talked about. So if you can do all of those now, that's wonderful. And it means it's a really great time to think about what if you can't do those things. And this is the type of thing where you might not need a care manager right now, but you might want to interview one and have one ready so that as things start to shift, you can get help with all of these things. If you can't manage those tasks, it's something that where, again, you should just be ready, willing, and able. You should just say, I need help. And don't feel bad asking for help, because there are a lot of people who do it either professionally or as volunteers who are there to help you with these tasks. And again, in terms of planning for all of these things, there's can be a loss of control as you age, and maybe you can't drive, so you have to rely on someone else to drive for you, or you can't clean your own house, or you can't cook your own meals, so you're dependent on someone else to do that. As part of your life plan, when you're communicating your wishes, the more information that someone else has to help you on your wishes, the more they can meet your hopes and your goals and your needs. So they're getting where you need to be. They're signing you up. If you like art and you want to do an art class, they can take initiative to do that. Again, you don't want people to be guessing, which is why communication is such a big part just of life and planning. Okay, so this social roles, housing, and community overlaps with a lot of things that we've talked about. And again, because a life plan is very comprehensive, so a lot of these things are intertwined. But something that we really want you to do is just take steps to maintain your social network so that you're not isolated. So you're still part of a community that will help build your village. And even if you're all in the same position and you can't necessarily help each other out driving to and from appointments, at least you have that camaraderie and you have some friendship of someone going through similar life events with you. With the current living situation and your aging needs, again, that's, do I live somewhere that I can live forever? Do I even want to live there? At some point you might think, maybe you're a solo ager here because your family lives really far away. And you might think, well, I don't really like the cold Massachusetts winter, so I want to move down to Florida and hang out in the sunshine, or I want to move to Virginia where my family is. But just think about, is your current situation what you need? And if not, where would you like to go? And what do you need to do to get there? In terms of resources for your area, a really big one, I have a slide on this later, but there's aging service access points. They're called ASAPs. And two big ones in our area are Minuteman Senior Services and Springwell. And so Minuteman covers Acton, Littleton, Concord, and then Springwell covers like Sudbury, Hudson, Natick. But basically, these are just large-scale agencies that are dedicated to giving you the information that you need. And they'll help caregivers if you're in a role of supporting someone, or if you want to print out the website in case someone's helping you. But the resources are wonderful because they're based on location. So they're very specific to your area and what like as a Sudbury resident, there's certain things you have access to. But they can give you referrals. They'll give you a consultation for free to get you started and say what they could or couldn't help you with. They have a website, it has links to Meals on Wheels, to transportation. Basically, an ASAP is a really good one-stop resource. So if you don't know where to start, that's a really good place to start. Also with aging in place, I keep talking about just sort of stairs and stuff, but you want to think about when you're looking at your current living situation, is there parking? Are you in a busy area? Is it noisy? Is it a 55 and up community? There's a lot of different things that you could look at that could impact whether or not it was a good place for you to live long term. Also, just not that you're necessarily going to move because your doctors are in a certain place, but you want to make sure you have, doctors close by, or the closest hospital. All of those things can improve your quality of life or your resources, and can make a place somewhere where you might want to stay for a long time, or might make you think, I should probably move somewhere else. And now the bread and butter for Generations Law Group is basically what can an elder law attorney help you with? And I recognize many of you just from being our clients and coming to prior events. So you probably have a good handle on this, but it's always nice to have a refresher because we don't want you to lose sight of these important documents. So an elder law attorney can help with basically anything that you need in terms of documents, like a last will and testament, healthcare documents, power of attorney. Some people can use a trust, and for some people they don't need one. We can help you look at what you have right now, and circumstances change over time. So there might be people where we think, okay, this basic estate plan is good, but in 5 to 10 years, we might look at it and say, oh, actually, a trust could be really beneficial to you. And we can also serve as an agent as needed. And so I'll go through the documents in a little bit more detail and explain that and how an agent can work on your behalf. So with a healthcare proxy, a healthcare proxy is a document that names someone and a backup or two to act on your behalf if you are not able to make healthcare decisions on your own. And so typically I tell clients it comes into play in 2 situations. One might be an emergency. Say that you were in a car accident and you're unconscious and they find out that you're the emergency contact, or if you have our client care program with the DocuBank card, they'll pick that up and they might call your contact. But that would be a situation where your healthcare proxy could be speaking on your behalf. And the other is if you have a long-term healthcare issue that impacts your competency, so you can't make decisions on your behalf. And so it just depends on the person, and the doctor would have to make the decision, but it could be activated on a longer term basis. So when a healthcare proxy is activated, the doctor would say, hi, Fran, you're the healthcare agent for this person, and she can't make decisions for herself. And so we need to know what to do in this specific circumstance. And so you're actually making decisions on someone's behalf. And so to you, when you're naming a healthcare agent, it's something you want to take very seriously, because that means someone is going to be speaking on your behalf potentially one day. And so you want to make sure you have someone that you trust completely, because hopefully you're going to be sharing information with them. And some of that could be private information about your healthcare in the past, or your current issues, or your family history in terms of cancer or illnesses. So you want to make sure it's someone you trust inherently in terms of sharing that information and using it to benefit you if a doctor asks questions. A healthcare agent doesn't necessarily have to be local. It is helpful sometimes to have someone to go to appointments with you, for example. But if they're only available by phone, as long as a doctor knows how to reach them and they know your wishes, then they can still do a really nice job. And then also just someone who's generally available and willing to do it, because sometimes people will not want to make healthcare decisions because they could be high risk, or it could be an emergency situation. So it's helpful to make sure that the person that you're naming as your healthcare proxy is willing and able to do it. And that you communicate with them. So the second document we have listed is the HIPAA authorization and release form. So when you go to the doctor's office or the dentist or pretty much anything related to health, you'll sign a bunch of paperwork when you go in. And one of those is actually usually a privacy notice. And that is the doctor's office, for example, saying, we're not going to share your information with anyone. We have the best privacy safeguards. We're doing everything we're supposed to be to maintain your privacy. This document is the opposite of that, saying, I am listing this trusted person or a couple people to receive information about my healthcare so you can talk to them freely. And we draft the HIPAA authorization separate from the healthcare proxy because there might be times when your healthcare proxy is not activated because you're fully competent to make your own decisions, but you might want a little bit of help. And that might mean calling the pharmacist to ask about side effects to medication or negotiating a bill with insurance where it's talking about your appointments and your care. Or it might mean following up with the doctor's office to schedule appointments. And just times when the doctor's office might say, oh, wait, nope, you're not our client. That's private information that might come out. The HIPAA authorization can let someone receive information that might otherwise be protected. The next thing on here is a living will. And a living will is, some people get it confused with the last will and testament. So I'll talk about the last will in a minute. But the living will is a non-binding document that states end of life wishes. So it basically sets out a bunch of scenarios that say, if I don't have a meaningful chance of recovery and or being in a permanent vegetative state, it's okay to let me die peacefully. And it just sets out a bunch of terms that your healthcare agent could read, or they could show it to the doctor, and the doctor could say, yes, I believe all of this to be true. And that would let the healthcare agent say, okay, you can let my friend or my loved one die peacefully because it sounds like all of the terms in this document are met. So the living will does not carry any authority on its own. The healthcare agent still has to speak it out loud and say, yes, it's okay to let them die peacefully. Some clients choose not to fill out a living will. It's completely personal preference. And some people will read it and say, I'm okay with everything, but I would really like a respirator. Or it's something where there's a standard guidance form, but you can still tweak it to match what you would want to be your end of life wishes. So the documents that I just talked about are all three are legal forms. So an attorney can prepare all of those for you. The next two on the next line are actually medical forms, but I wanted you to make sure that you know about them and the difference in them. So a MOLST form, it's Massachusetts Medical Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. It's a MOLST form is printed on a bright pink piece of paper, and it's a very comprehensive medical form. It's something that a doctor's office or basically a physician, it could be if you're living in a nursing home, you could be in the hospital, it just depends. But if you have advanced stage illness, a doctor may get you to fill out one of these forms. And the form is pretty broad about end of life care. And what you write on that form actually has medical direction to it. So if a doctor sees the form and the things on the form are true, they don't need a healthcare agent to override that. They can follow what the form says. Also on the slide is a DNR, or do not resuscitate. And in Massachusetts, they're sort of phasing out the DNR in favor of the MOLST form. But the do not resuscitate form is exactly what it sounds like, but it's very specific related to resuscitation and CPR, for example, whereas the MOLST form includes more medical decision making. So both of those are medical forms. An attorney wouldn't draft them for you. And again, a MOLST form, it's the conversation you could have with your doctor when you get older or if you have an illness, but it's not a given that you'll go in for your checkup and just because you're 75, 85, 90 years old that you'll get one of those forms. It's meant for a very specific instruction when you have a serious illness. So with all of the healthcare documents, the goal is to avoid guardianship, and guardianship is a court proceeding, it goes through the probate and family court, whereby someone petitions the court and they're named as your guardian. It's great to have a guardian if you need a guardian, but the problem is that you have to file with the court. It takes a lot of time and also money to have a guardian appointed. And also they have regular reporting requirements back to the court, and all they're trying to do is help you. So ideally, if you have a healthcare agent acting on your behalf, and you, especially if you have the HIPAA form for the information sharing, the goal is not to have guardianship needed. There is a statutory healthcare form, and some clients will come with it, and it's about a 2-page form. The bulk of it is on 1 page in terms of the information that's on there. It's a nice fallback form if you don't have something else, but it's not as comprehensive as something that an attorney would draw up for you. So there are some specific provisions that we put in our healthcare proxies that are not in the statutory form. And if you end up in a facility and they're looking at your form for specific powers, you want it to be the strongest document you can have. So that's why a lot of times people will come in and say, well, I do have a healthcare proxy. And we'll say, okay, that's good, but we want to make it better. Because if you wait too long and someone loses capacity, for example, you can't amend a healthcare proxy. Then you have to go in and you still have to seek guardianship.
So Tiffany, is the GLF able to act as an agent?
Yeah. So in Generations Law Group, we have 4 attorneys here, and any of us can be hired to act as your agent, whether it's a healthcare proxy, or on the next slide, we'll talk about power of attorney. And so we have an attorney fiduciary program, and a fiduciary is just someone acting on your behalf. So if someone wants to hire us to act as a fiduciary, you have to enroll in that program. There is a specific fee for it. Oftentimes it's the attorney that you work with to draft your documents would also be your fiduciary. When we have that program, we have a mandatory meeting within the first month or so after you sign documents, where it can be on Zoom or in person, but we basically sit down and we run through all the questions relevant to the document that we're possibly going to be using to act on your behalf. A lot of what we do is run through our workbook that we have, and we have a workbook for independent agers that has all of the questions and things that you could think about. And so yes, when we act as healthcare proxy, power of attorney, trustee, personal representative, if we act as one or all, it's going to be an attorney, and we meet with you to make sure we know exactly what you want to happen. So a power of attorney, we create durable power of attorneys, and a power of attorney is someone who can handle legal and financial matters. The default is actually not to have them being durable, but we make them durable, which means that they'll last through incapacity. So you sign your documents when you have full mental capacity, and if you become incapacitated, the document will still carry on and have the same power that you vested in the people you named. So they can help with a whole broad spectrum of things, like if you need help selling a house, if you need banking transactions, if you have digital assets or social media, any sort of thing that you would need that's not related to healthcare, your power of attorney can help with. So there's 2 types of powers of attorney, and I think especially when you're a solo ager, it's an important thing to think about the difference in the 2. So one type of power is a springing power, and one type of power is an immediate power. The immediate one just means as soon as you sign the power of attorney, the person you named as your primary agent has power. As of that time when you sign it, you could technically say, hi, Jenny, I need you to go down to the bank and do this for me. And you give them a copy of the power of attorney, and they go to the bank and they can do anything for you. And I think that works really well for people if you have a spouse that you're naming, or an adult child, or if you have a best friend of 50 years you're naming. Sometimes for solo agers, there's more comfort in having a springing power. And springing just means that you set out the document completely, it has all the same powers. But at the very beginning, you say, this document is not effective until something else happens. And quite often what we write in there is the opinion of one licensed physician. to say that you don't have the capacity to make the decisions. So this goes back to about 20 minutes ago, where I was talking about the importance of having a primary care physician. If you have a springing durable power of attorney and we need to activate it, it's much easier if you have a doctor who knows you and can say, oh, you know what? I've known Carol for 12 years and she has been declining, and I think I'm going to write a letter activating her power of attorney. If you have that rapport with a doctor who knows and can notice those changes and get an appointment sooner rather than later, that can be really beneficial. So with a power of attorney, the goal is to avoid conservatorship. So a conservator is someone who's appointed by the court, similar to a healthcare agent. There's a petition, it's time and it's money, and that everything else is on hold while you're waiting for the person to be appointed. And then they have annual reporting requirements as well. And they have to say, these are their assets, this is how I spent them, or what I did on their behalf. And so it's nice if you've already named an agent who knows what you want and has that power, because then they don't have the court oversight. So we recommend that you have a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy, because between those two, you can mostly keep the court out. The last two on this slide are the last will and testament and trust. And so with a last will and testament, that is your document that has basically, once I pass away, this is what I want to happen to all of my things. And so it says who you are, who your family is, pay all my debts, and then it sets out the framework. And it might be, give it to my friends, split it between my children 50-50. It might say everything to charity. Basically, it's just a framework that lets your personal representative, who's the person you name, know what they need to do to basically to wrap up all of your affairs. A trust is something that can be created. I don't want to get too much into the details of it, but not everyone needs a trust. Some people say, well, my neighbors have a trust, so I want a trust. And you say, well, let's look at what your goals are with the trust. Two main things that can happen is, depending on the type of trust, you might have asset protection. And asset protection could mean, I think in a couple of years from now, I might need Mass Health, which is Massachusetts' version of Medicaid. Or it might be, I won the lottery and I don't want my beneficiaries paying all these taxes. So what can I do to protect some of my assets? So asset protection can come into play. And then many people also just have a revocable living trust. And that's something that can help have set up a really nice framework, but also can have estate tax benefits to it. And it can help avoid probate. And so when you set up a trust with us, we give you very specific instructions depending on the type of trust, so you know exactly what you or the trustees need to do. So the estate planning part of it is, again, it's just part. So there's the lifestyle, the medical part, the friendship and keeping the joy in life part. There's the paperwork to make sure if someone's going to act on your behalf. So while we emphasize all of this estate planning stuff, just know that it's just a part of the puzzle that you need to have ready. So with probate, when someone passes away, even if you have a will, a personal representative, which used to be called executor. So if you're thinking, what is personal representative? That's the person who takes over and goes to the court and says, so Anne had a will. And so the personal representative would say, this is Anne's will, and here's a bunch of paperwork, and it says who she wanted everything to go to these people. These are the people who were her heirs, but might not have been in the will. There's just like a stack of paperwork. But basically, you file a petition, a bunch of paperwork with the court. The court looks it over and says, wonderful. I see that you're the personal representative. I'm going to give you what's called letters of authority to act as personal representative. And with that authority, the personal representative can go and close down bank accounts or talk to insurance or sell a house if needed. But basically, probate is the court-involved process of closing down someone's estate after they pass away. If you have a trust, your will would actually become a safety net and just a pour over. And so when we say a trust avoids probate, it's because if you have everything either already in the name of the trust or you have beneficiaries, then there would be nothing lingering in your name alone. So the court wouldn't need to be involved. And so when we give you the instructions called funding instructions, we say, okay, with this asset, this asset, with this asset, do all of this stuff, no court involvement needed. So there's a follow-up question. Does everyone's assets need to go through probate when they pass away? It depends. If you pass away and you have an asset that's in your name alone, like say I have a Bank of America account and it's my checking account and it's just in my name, that would be a probate asset because it doesn't have anywhere to automatically go. So if, however, I had a joint owner, so say my husband and I are on the Bank of America account, when I passed away, it would automatically go through his, so it avoids probate. IRAs or life insurance, for example, those have beneficiaries, so those don't have to go through probate. If your house, say that you have joint ownership or tenants by the entirety with a spouse, if there's something by operation of law where the property or the money or something goes directly to someone else, then there's no probate. So the biggest concern is you owning something in your own name, whether a house, property, bank account, something like that. Anything like that will have to go through probate. Okay, I have a follow-up question. So it says if I am the sole owner, it has to go through probate. And the answer is yes. So if you pass away and you're the sole owner of something, there has to be probate because the court has to give someone authority to do something with it. So if you have a will, and it's especially if you have the original copy of the will, you can do something easy like, well, it's not easy, but you can do informal probate, which is not quite as detailed as formal probate. But in either case, a personal representative will be appointed who will do something with that property. Does a payment upon death avoid probate? Yes, so with a bank account, you can either do a pay on death, a transfer on death, or a beneficiary. It depends on the type of the account and the financial institution. But if you're not sure, then you can either look and if you have online banking, it's often under succession planning, or you can call customer service and say, how do I avoid probate on this account? And they'll tell you what you need to do.
Tiffany, can you list 2 people as power of attorney or healthcare proxy?
You can. So with healthcare proxy, I think your best bet is to name a person and then actually 2 backups. And I wouldn't recommend naming 2 people as co-healthcare proxies because in an emergency situation, what happens if they can't reach both people? So I think it's good to start with one. If they can't be reached, then it would go down to the next person. With a power of attorney, quite often people will have co-powers of attorney. One issue is that banks can be really finicky about powers of attorney, and they might say, well, I see this document that you've named 2 people and they can do it, but how do I know that they agree? What if they don't agree? And so I think it can be tricky sometimes to list co-agents. Okay, I think that's everything that we had. I hope that you feel empowered and that if nothing else, it's giving you questions to think about. But if you need any help, please contact me or your attorney at Generations Law Group, and we'd be happy to help you. And thanks for joining us today.